Hello, everyone, and welcome to the cosmic weather for June. My name is Philip Young. I am a professional astrologer located in Cumming, Georgia. And each month I try to do a weather report about what's coming up and what's going on with the astrology for the month. And we're going to be talking about what's happening in June. And I can honestly say it is going to be, I guess I heard this phrase recently, it's going to be a banger of a month. We're definitely going to be seeing a lot of astrological activity that is really going to be, in some ways, the repercussion of previous astrological activity, which has been pretty intense all the way around. And we're just in an intense period, which if you've seen any of my earlier videos, or for some reason you want to go back and see some of the things I've said about each of the previous months, but more in general about what's going on a broader scale with points that are transitioning from one sign to another that are the slower moving points, essentially starting at Saturn and going all the way out to Pluto. You can certainly take a look at those. In sort of broad strokes, we're definitely in a period of crisis. And I really mean that word more in a, a, a descriptive way, not so much a fear-based sort of way, but what a crisis represents in terms of just tremendous internet energetic change. And the way that it is affecting everyone is because the points that are involved historically are all tied to major individual periods of transformation for humankind and for society. And there are three of them in particular that individually in the previous historical situation were standouts at different times, basically from the late 1770s when we have the American Revolution, the period of time for the Civil War in the United States, and then also for the Great Depression and World War II. Those same alignments are all happening together at this time. So within that, the cosmic weather from month to month is trying to be a response to this overall energy that is tremendous upheaval that really got its start back in 2008, as it turns out, but really picked up steam in terms of what we're experiencing in 2020. And what I offer here is, again, the idea that these energies are in play at least until 2030. I think we will see the volatility reaching a peak point this year and next year. And then we'll probably see the repercussions and some beginning of settling that will be really, I think, 2028, 2029. And then what I would offer is by 2030, we're going to be in a new reality that will have some framework to it that is consistent, whether it's something we like or don't like, depending on where each of us is in our journey. There will be restabilizing that I think will eventually occur. But right now we're in the middle of the chaos and trying to just talk about how to navigate that in terms of what astrology offers us on a month-to-month basis. So this video is always going to be about three different processes. One is ingress, which is when points move from one sign to the next. And because of the month, we're looking at these faster moving points like the Sun and Mercury and Venus and Mars. These are all ingressing usually within a month or within a month and a half. Mars is a little over a month and sometimes 2 months. Then we're going to look at if there are any retrogrades going on. What's the retrograde energy doing? Which points are retrograde? How's that affecting things? And then looking at the aspect of the transits, which is how are the points in the sky interacting in significant ways for certain periods of time that have an impact on our energy and our choices and how we sort of deal with things in relation to our own chart. Now, the thing I'll always tell people is that when you're wanting to delve into astrology, it really is important to be able to get a chance to look at your own chart in depth and understand how complex your chart is, because it isn't just about your sun sign. It isn't just about your sun and moon sign. It isn't just about your sun, moon, and rising sign. It's about at least 15 to 20 different points, all having a different role, different ways in which they interact in the charts for each of us as individuals, so that we can understand the complexity of our own story and the complexity of how we're being part of the world story, part of the United States story, all of it interweaving together. But this is going to be again a little bit broad based. So we're looking at the beginning, the ingress, the monthly ingress is the sun, which happens around the 19th to the 21st of each month. And this month, the sun will change signs on the 20th of June, and it will go from Gemini into Cancer. And so it's going to shift from Gemini's kind of light and curious and communicative energy into Cancer's nurturing and emotional depth. So we're going to be moving into a watery energy from an air energy. And what we can expect is a time to really honor our feelings, nourish close relationships, create safe and supportive spaces. I think that's going to be a big part of this. This is something I've mentioned in previous videos and will continue to mention is the need to be able to get supportive energy from the people around us and give supportive energy in ways that help us buffer the instability that is absolutely happening right now. And so kind of taking an assessment of who would you call if you really needed something like I need a place to crash or I need to get some support in some way. I may need to borrow some money or people may be reaching out to you. Do you have people in your life that you would loan money to? And there may be a need for that because we're definitely going to be continuing to experience economic instability as part of these transits and part of what's going on that is really kind of a result of what's been done years before that's now coming to a consequence. In fact, I was thinking about having a title for this video called Truth, Lies, and Consequences. And I think June is going to be the month where it's more pervasive in seeing and feeling those impacts in ways that will touch our lives, all of us in some way that beginning to let us know, hey, the familiar world that we are coming out of is really starting to take a shift and we're going to be feeling it on a much more day-to-day level. And June will be probably the month where the impact starts to really arrive. And what I mean by that is really related to the issue of not only the tariffs, but the disruption in the global supply chain, which the tariffs have triggered, that has not been felt because there's a lag. Absolutely. And so, following the YouTubers, and I found this to be a really good resource, is to go to locate YouTube individuals that are in the industries that are likely to be affected to get a more reasonable understanding of what's happening rather than some of the more extremist alarm bells that go on. It's not to say that the repercussions aren't going to be profound, but to be able to watch, say, two or three videos from people who are in the shipping industry that actually run businesses at the ports in California or up in the East Coast, and to be able to hear from them that there are changes that are quite significant, but the repercussion of those changes would not be felt until really this month. So it will be interesting to see what's going to happen. And I think the Cancerian energy of the sun is really going to make everybody sort of think, who who's in my family, who's in my tribe. And that's going to be emphasized also by another particular ingress that involves Jupiter going into Cancer this month on July the 10th. And that is a very tribal kind of energy that's going to be activated. It really is going to be sort of who can we rely on in times of crisis, and where are we in terms of that tribe if we need to access it or leverage it or someone needs it from us. So that's going to be one of the big shifts. And Jupiter takes a year to go through a sign. So once it enters Cancer, it will be there all the way through 2026. And that's going to be very, very important. Now, Mercury is cruising along right now. It's moving direct and it's going to actually transition twice. It's going to ingress twice in the month of June. So it starts out in Gemini and it's going to go into Cancer on the 8th. And then on the 26th, it will move from Cancer and go into Leo. So once Mercury goes into Cancer, which will still be ahead of the Sun going into Cancer, it's still going to be more of our thoughts and our communication around these questions of listening with empathy, speaking from the heart, reflecting before responding. But it's also going to be a lot more emotional in terms of the responses we do want. So if we're feeling fearful or angry or excited, these energies will also be amplified under the Cancerian energy, which is what do I need to communicate that has to do with my emotional needs and my emotional concerns. Now, once we get to June 26th, when it goes into Leo, that shift is going to be much more about trying to be confident and charismatic, sharing ideas in an excited way. And it may be that's going to be a challenging time because we may be entering a period where it's harder to feel excited. And so there may be, again, a fire energy that's more about being frustrated or being bombastic because there are things that are happening in the world that are creating new limitations, new instability, and new insecurity. Unfortunately, that's just where the energy seems to be really developing and digging in, and that's because of so much inconsistency that we're seeing that is applying itself to a disruptive way of really rebalancing what's going on in the world dynamic, whether we're talking about world economies or whether we're talking about society and how the global society is interacting with itself. It's all being really turned topsy-turvy, if you will. And from an astrological standpoint, it's very much in alignment with what's going on with the energies right now. Now, Venus, which has to do with how we relate to people, that's going to be in Taurus. It's actually it's going to start out in Aries, but it's going to go into Taurus on June the 6th. And so once it moves from Aries to Taurus, Venus becomes more about taking care of our body, our connections where we feel safe and secure. It's really about getting grounded and in the relationships that ground us and that we can count on. And so there's going to be a very renewed appreciation for comfort and loyalty and physical presence in relationships. So with the ingress of Jupiter into Cancer, the Cancerian energy that's coming with the Sun, Mercury's playing it, then Venus going into Taurus, there's a bit of circling the wagons concept. You know, the idea of, hey, we're traveling and we need to stop and rest and protect ourselves. So let's put the wagons in a circle. We're going to be inside of that. That gives us the best defense from, anything that might be external that could be a threat. That kind of energy is really what we're talking about developing this month. Now, Mars will actually go into Virgo on the 17th of June. So a lot of change happening in June in terms of the ingresses. Now, as again, Sun's always doing it once a month. Mercury sometimes is once a month, sometimes twice a month. If it's in its direct phase, it can do it sometimes twice a month because it's every 3 weeks. Venus is really once a month. Mars is a little bit longer. But going into Virgo is going to bring in a sort of practicality. Mars loves to drive forward, and Virgo wants to be very meticulous about things. So there could be some frustration energy that starts to really show up. And one way to look at this would be if we put it in the scale of what's going on with, say, global trade and business and the tariffing and the rising of prices and inflation and all of that. Mars could really feel like we've got to be very selective about how we spend our money. We can't get as much as we were able to get previously, maybe not even be able to get certain things. But there's definitely going to be a feeling of potential restriction that is going to be a little bit uncomfortable. But the way Mars moves through this successfully, the way you take advantage of this is that you look at refining your choices, you look at how to solve problems, and you take a practical approach. If you can lean into that Virgo energy of this is about practical, frugal, thoughtful decision making, then you can move forward with Mars. If it's more like I want what I've always had before and I can't get it at the price that I used to get it or the way that I want it, then it's going to be a very frustrating period of time while Mars is in Virgo. No doubt about that. Now, there's only one retrograde in play in terms of the key points, and that is Pluto. Pluto is retrograde in Aquarius at the beginning of the month, will be retrograde through the entire month. And this is about societal change and changes in technology, the role within communities. It's very much a question of what's becoming outdated and is going to really fall by the wayside. And I would say probably the most sort of in our face is AI, artificial intelligence, and the speed at which that is going to move is going to be in some ways accelerated by Pluto being in Aquarius, Aquarius being a sign associated with technology, as well as questions about how the society views itself and what its ideals are. But next month, Uranus will move into Gemini, and I think we'll see again further advance, further encroachment of AI into daily life in ways that can also be displacing. And that is not something that can be ignored or also prevented in many ways. So right now with Pluto being retrograde in Aquarius, it is really looking at what's the society we're part of, the society that we have created, that we think we may be creating, that's going forward. What does it look like from a community level, even down to the level of family, but working our way out from family to community to city to state to country to the world. And so this Aquarian energy is really going to put Pluto in a phase for the next 20 years of reshaping what it is to be in civilization. Now, I always like to cover the current positions of points. Now, Saturn entered Aries on May the 24th. It will not stay in Aries permanently. It will go back into Pisces. That will happen on September the 1st, but it will be in Aries this entire month. And this is really about facing harsh reality. I think Saturn is uncomfortable. The technical term is it's in its fall in Aries, but it's definitely uncomfortable there because Aries wants to pioneer. It wants to function in the way it wants to independently. Saturn is all about restriction and responsibility. And so, what I think this is why I say June is going to be, I think, a month of, on a day-to-day level, really seeing where the limits are and what the limits look like they're going to be going into the future, because Saturn will work its way back into Aries, and that will happen on February the 13th of 2026, and then it will be there for 2.5 years. So I think there's going to be sort of an austerity energy that we're going to get a taste of, the beginning of the taste of it this month. We're going to feel it certainly through July and August. And then the question will be, well, how do we adjust to that in our personal lives, in our community, whatever it happens to be? So Saturn in Aries is really going to be, in a way, very demanding that you do what's necessary, and you may be restricted or limited as a result of that. And how do you handle that? How do you face those things and take care of things? And also, Saturn in Aries is interesting in that whenever something comes up that's a responsibility, Saturn in Aries wants you to take it on immediately, not delay it. So if, for example, you have some repair that needs to be done to your vehicle, or something needs to be done with regard to a decision about a relationship, Saturn in Aries is the sooner the better. Don't wait. Don't put it aside. Face it. And also, a lot of ways, Saturn in Aries is kind of a message of eat your vegetables before you have your dessert. And so, this is a different energy where Saturn in Pisces was like, well, what are all of these dreams and visions, and how can we make them happen? And even if we haven't got anything right, we want to put it out there and see what transpires. Saturn in Aries is much more down to the hardcore, what needs to be done in order to keep moving forward and make sure we're doing that in a responsible way. Now, Chiron has been in Aries since April of 2018, and it's going to stay there all the way through 2027. And that means that we're dealing with a wounding healing energy around our independence. We're also in the United States experiencing the fifth Chiron return. So obviously, feeling restrictions and wounds and healing around our freedom and what we can do with our energy, our resources, is continuing to be limited in some way. And so I think the advice I would give to people with what's going on energetically is kind of a batten down the hatches type of energy, and be prepared for more restriction, more limitation until we can get through whatever this period of disruption is to the next order of things, which again, I'm in the camp of I don't know. I feel that I'm in the camp to say 2028, 2029, I think we'll have a direction. I think we'll have a settling of these energies because they'll have transition, they'll have completed their transition. But what the specifics look like, and whether or not it's going to be one thing or the other, it'll certainly probably be a blend, but it could be something that none of us really foresee, because it's going to be so different than what we've had before. But this energy of Chiron, this wounding healing energy, is still at work in all of our charts around how we take care of ourselves. So there's definitely, with Aries energy being so heavily activated, with Saturn there, Chiron there, and also Neptune. Neptune went temporarily into Aries on March the 30th. It's going to go back into Pisces on October the 22nd, and then permanently go into Aries on January 24th, 25th of 2026, and be there for 13 to 14 years. So this Aries theme of survival, of independence, of pioneering is going to be very much a component of the new future that we're headed towards. Now, Uranus went into Taurus in May of 2018, and it's going to be there until April of 2026. Now, it is going to do like Saturn and Neptune. It's going to go into the next sign, Gemini, come back into Taurus, then go into Gemini permanently in 2026. So in 2026, we will have 3 points in the new signs, and they're going to be there to stay. But right now, it's bouncing back and forth. And certainly, we've seen through Uranus and Taurus really breakdowns and breakthroughs in daily life, which is Taurian. Uranus is the breakthrough energy. Some of these things will stick and some of them won't, but the disruption level is at its peak. And this point, especially historically, the last time it was in Taurus was 1934 to 1942. So Great Depression, World War II, but more importantly, a real fundamental change in society and its designs on a daily level. And I've often also mentioned, and I'll mention it again just for people who haven't heard it before, but 1935, when Uranus was in Taurus, was when Social Security was created. Social Security Act was put into effect. The first check was paid in 1938. So to see Social Security disrupted or potentially disrupted or broken or reshaped during this transit or to be part of that makes perfect sense. So, what we're going to be looking at when Uranus gets to Gemini, I think, again, is going to be this intense push of how AI is going to do even more than it's already doing, and what that can mean in terms of, once again, eliminating jobs and not necessarily creating as many jobs as it will be eliminating. And that's really what the issue is. It's not that AI doesn't have opportunity for people to do work with it, but essentially it is being able to do more with less. You're letting the artificial intelligence do things that are require less effort, energy, because it's pulling from massive resources and directing it in very fast, high-speed ways. So we are facing a real, again, fundamental question about how is society or civilization, or some of us in terms of whatever we're doing, going to live in an AI-driven world, which is what is being pursued at a breakneck speed, without a doubt. Neptune went into Aries on March the 30th, and it's going to spend some time there. And again, historically, this was the period in the middle of the Civil War when Neptune went into Aries, and it did indicate a new direction, sort of a who's going to win and who's going to lose type of energy. So where we're headed right now is what's going to be the I guess the spiritual Aries new direction. And again, new direction does not necessarily mean progressive. It just means that it's not the direction that was before. And now we could see something that is a modification of what we've had previously. But I think with what's transpiring with these other transits and how they're playing out, I really think we're going to be looking at something very different. I just don't know exactly what that's going to look like. It takes a little bit more shape as each month passes and as each year passes. And so we'll have to wait and see what those repercussions are. And for me, it's going to be at least probably another full year plus before we start to see some clarity of this is now going to be part of the new normal. And I do think that's going to include the AI, and it may also include robotics. There's certainly going to be a push to try to make that the case. And then, finally, Pluto started out in Aquarius. It's going to be in Aquarius for the next 20 years, and I've already discussed some of that. Now, what's interesting about this particular video is there is so much happening in the month of June in terms of transits, because what I do is I look at Mars all the way out to Pluto, and Mars is definitely going to have a very active application. And it's, as always, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but there's definitely energy in here that, again, is going to represent some high-level disruption. But to start out with, we're going to have Neptune in Aries forming a complementary relationship with Pluto in Aquarius. And that's going to happen it started in April, on April the 20th, and it's going to run all the way until October the 22nd. So again, keeping in mind that the changes are not, quote, in my mind, good or bad. They're either flowing or they're disrupting and are disrupted. And so a sextile is a flowing energy. So the idea is that we will continue to see a flow between what needs to be the new understanding, the new sort of Neptunian energy, and what's also tied to the new and developing transformation of society. So that's going to flow. Whether we like the flow or not, that will be sort of in a way how we're positioned in our own stories. But the flow is absolutely happening. The change is absolutely going to be moving without really much impediment in that regard, because we are talking about Neptune and Pluto, the two outermost planets. So this is a global situation, and it is definitely flowing forward. Next, we're going to have Saturn also in Aries, and it's going to merge with Neptune. Now, it's not going to actually connect specifically at the same degree. It'll get close, but won't actually make that connection yet. And that's going to start on May the 24th and run until September the 1st. So now we've got Neptune, which is a nebulous energy, and Saturn, which is a defining and containing energy, again, being very close together. They will have their moment where they cross each other in 2026, but we're going to feel that energy of a sense of whatever we envision, reality is going to provide some restriction to that. And so that's going to be the push and pull. Is we know we're going in a Neptunian expansion energy, but Saturn's like, but how are we getting there? Like specifically, what are the choices that are being made, and how is that going to affect us? And in terms of the Aries energy, it is going to again come back to these terms like survival and what we need to do to be self-aware and possibly even selfish. Now, I recently had a recommendation to check out a video on Netflix about dogs. It was a documentary. And one of the things I wanted to be able to share from that documentary in this particular video is there are two sort of interesting ways of talking about survival. And the one that most people are familiar with is survival of the fittest. But the other one is actually survival of the friendliest, which is what comes up in this video. And I thought it was really such a brilliant way of describing things, because what it talks about is that, at the time historically, when you have basically which predators are going to be at the apex, humanity was rising as the apex predator. There were other apex predators, including bears and lions and wolves. And it was the wolves that in some way figured out, wait a second, if we kind of become friendly with the humans, which for whatever reason figured out is going to be the dominant apex predator, we have a much more likely chance of continuing. And so, every dog that exists is a descendant of a wolf. So it's interesting to realize that this survival of the friendliest actually proves to be the best method. And so I bring it up because the energies that are going on are definitely going to feel like survival energies, but the question of being able to network, to be able to find the connectivity that you need to have, that's going to probably really make the difference in how you get through it, who you get through it with, and what things look like on the other side. And so the idea of what's transpiring, let's say, when I'm looking at it from the standpoint of what I see information wise going on in the news, that the United States as an entity is trying to play survival of the fittest, and it's actually requiring the rest of the world to go to survival of the friendliest. And if this example from the documentary is any indication, the survival of the friendliness in the long run is going to be the one that's successful. And the survival of the fittest, while in the short term, might be able to demonstrate against any one of the individual other predators, if you will, other challengers, that it is bigger, stronger than them. Well, that's all fine and well, unless that survival of the friendliness come together, and then it will, without a doubt, outstrip the other example. And so I think that's an interesting concept that came into my purview at a time when these transits are behaving the way they are. Still, at the very beginning of the month, Mars now is going to be in a trine or collaborate with Chiron and Aries, while it's also going to be squaring with Uranus and Taurus. So here we're going to hit that energy where there's some flow, but there's also some dissonance. And the collaboration with Aries means that there's going to be more initiative, especially in areas where there's vulnerability that kind of held you back. And so authentic expression becomes a catalyst within your inner space for you to repair yourself and maybe even find new leadership roles that you didn't think were actually possible. And then Mars with the square in Leo to Uranus and Taurus means that we're going to continue to see sudden disruptions, unexpected things that are going to happen. These could be things that are external. It could be choices that leadership is making, but there's going to be also a strong rebellious energy that's going to be percolating under all of this. There's also going to be a desire for more creative expression that's going to be hard to get out, perhaps because of this tension that's going to be happening between these points. Now, Mars transits last about 5 to 7 days. So this energy of the first one, Mars trining with Chiron, that's going to be from June 2nd to June 14th. It's going to be a little bit of a longer one. And then the Mars in the square with Uranus, that's going to be from June 5th to June 21st. So part of this is these energies are really tracking with each other. They're going to have a little bit of a longer span. So again, that's why I feel like June is going to be a pivotal month. I mean, not to say that things that haven't happened before create a pivot, but I think more of a sort of really down to the level of people seeing it in their daily lives on a broader scale. June is going to be bringing that into our purview. Now, the second week in June, from June 8th to June 15th, we have a lot of carryover. The Neptune sextile with Pluto is going to continue. The Saturn conjunct Aries is going to continue. Neptune and Aries is going to continue. We're going to have Mars still trining with Chiron. We're also going to have Mars in the square with Uranus. What's new in the second week is Jupiter will be in Cancer and it will square with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So now we're talking about emotional growth being blocked by hard lessons. Optimism is going to meet with resistance from responsibilities and confining or confusing ideals. And there's going to be a tension in trying to nurture dreams and pursue things forward in a quick way. So, you know, patience, emotional resilience, these are all going to be key to dealing with this transit that's going to run from June the 10th to July 3rd. So it's really going to be, again, the majority of this month. So I think what we're looking at is, again, I don't know, maybe the fair way of saying it is kind of a comeuppance or certainly an amount of consequence. And it's going to be dependent upon where each individual is positioned as well as where each community is. What has your community done in terms of taking care of its tax base? What has it done in terms of the state managing its budget? I mean, all of these things are going to be sort of, again, kind of in our face sort of scenario. And then another action at this time will be Jupiter and Cancer forming an inconjunct, something that's a disruptive energy with Pluto in Aquarius. And that's going to be from June 12th all the way to July 2nd. So again, another energy that is challenging in some way or uncomfortable. And this means that emotional growth and deep transformation feel out of sync. And this means that we're going to have expanding comfort zones that need release from old patterns. And that's going to create tension between our personal feelings and the collective transformation. So there's definitely going to, I think, be a lot of situations in which we may be looking at it and going, well, this is not the way it's been, or I didn't expect it to go this way, or I don't know why the world is acting this way, and I'm part of it and don't really like it or agree with it. That will all be kind of the norm with this particular energy applying itself to us. And then, the third week in June, we're going to again continue to have a lot of carryover. All of those previous transits that I mentioned are continuing to go on, but now we've got three new ones involving Mars. Like I said, Mars is going to have a huge impact this month, and it's really going to start in the second half of the month. And again, I feel like that's going to be when we're going to start to see some of these impacts of things that were initiated back in April that now are going to come home to roost, if you will, in June. So Mars will be in Virgo and it will form a complementary sextile with Jupiter in Cancer, and that will be from June 17th to June the 30th. And this is, again, flowing energy. So this means that we'll have a practical action can align with emotional growth and expansion. And so efforts benefit from being optimistic as much as possible and taking a nurturing approach so that you make steady progress. So it isn't about rushing in and doing something big and flashy. It's about setting an intention and continuing on it in as regular a way as possible. And this should hopefully build some confidence for us that we can handle what's going on, but it is going to require a sobering sort of attitude. And then Mars will actually also at this time in conjunct with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So here again, we've got a layer of something that's flowing along with a layer of something that's creating some disruption. It's shorter. It's going to be from June 17th to June 25th. And it does mean that underlying this desire to move things ahead in a methodical way, it's still going to be a challenge of being disciplined and also having some flexibility with regard to a new world order that's coming out. It's just going to feel uncomfortable. And so I think that's sort of part of it. The inconjunct is always like kind of an itch you can't quite get to, but you also know that it's like a bug bite. Eventually, it will go away, but until it does, you're trying to deal with it, but you're also kind of not trying to scratch it because you don't want to aggravate it, but it's bothering you. That's the inconjunct. That's kind of the best example I can give. And then we're going to have Mars also in conjuncting the retrograde Pluto in Aquarius. So we're going to get what's called a yod formation out of this, and it's known as a finger of God. And this means that the challenges between the balance between practical action and deep internal powerful shifts, which is the Plutonic energy. And this is going to create conflicts of control, resistance to change when we're not going to be able to get out of the way of it, and a need for careful adjustment. Uh, Things are going to continue to stay in a very agitated state. That's why I use the word crisis. Crisis to me and agitation is really where we are and where we're going to be for some time yet. And by some time yet, I mean at least another year plus, maybe 2 years. And I know that's not easy to hear. I don't like saying it, but it is kind of like this is where we are from an astrological and energetic standpoint. So there are going to be two of these yods called fingers of God, these connections between these 3 points. So one's going to involve retrograde Pluto in Aquarius, having an inconjunct with Jupiter in Cancer, which is sextiling Mars, which is then inconjunct with Pluto. So this is going to be about transformation and growth. It's going to be a bit uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary. Challenges may feel overwhelming under this combination, but they do push for breakthrough and insights around healing and realignment of purpose. Very much so the case that we may be looking at our lives and going, well, this isn't where I thought I would be. I've got to pivot. I've got to figure out a new direction. And then the second yod is going to involve Mars and Virgo forming an inconjunct with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. That's then going to sextile with Pluto, which is then going to inconjunct back to Mars. And so now that's going to happen from June 18th to June 25th. So that first yod is from June 18th to June 27th. The second one is from June 18th to June 25th. So they're working together, if you will. This yod is going to be about tensions arising from conflicting drives for control and freedom. And this is going to require adaptability and patience. So the challenge is to figure out how to harmonize practical efforts with inspired risk taking and navigating uncertainty with a difficulty to focus, honestly. So there is going to this month is going to really be a shaking up of what we see externally, but also what we feel internally. And then the final week is just all of this stuff continuing on. So I'm just going to go down the list. We're going to be looking at Neptune in Aries, sextile with Pluto in Aquarius. That's going to continue. That Saturn in Aries conjuncting with Neptune in Aries, that's going to continue, although that will end on the 1st of September. But it's going to continue all the way through this month, next month. You've got Jupiter in Cancer squaring with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. That will finish up on July the 3rd. Then we've got Jupiter in Cancer in conjunct with retrograde Pluto in Aquarius. That will finish up on July the 2nd. Lastly, we've got Mars in Virgo sextile Jupiter from June 17th to June 30th. So that will end at the end of the month. And then we have Mars and Virgo in conjunct the energy of retrograde Pluto in Aquarius, and that will be ending on the 27th. And then the two yods will be in effect until the end of the month. So a lot to take in. I know it's a lot of information. I hope it's helpful in understanding that feeling like things are like you're walking on shifting sand. You're absolutely right. That is happening. And so it is going to be about trying to figure out how to, and maybe even a better is like we're walking on a tightrope. And each step we take, you've got to try to get your balance and keep from wobbling too much and maybe falling. But it is that kind of tension that I think a tightrope walking June, I would say June this I think is going to be the title I put down for this is walking the tightrope. June will be walking the tightrope. I hope everyone finds their way through and keeps safe and is able to connect with the people that can support them and certainly all the best going forward.